Welcome once more, football lovers and Africans in particular. If you look at the top of your screen, you are going to see four pictures. There is a background story to why these four pictures are appearing the way they appeared and why people were praising Akor Adams and people, Africans, were against Algeria. I'll give you a background story to everything that transpired currently in this AFCON before Algeria were kicked out. Why people were visibly against, Algeria, and people were praying for Nigeria to defeat Algeria, and the reason why they were attacking the Algerian, team as a whole. Now, from the start of the game, DRC Congo had a supporter, one fan, that always appears in suit and will always raise his hand. That hand gesture he is making is not a form of anything but in respect to one man that is respected in the whole of Africa, known as Patrice Lumumba. This man is well respected because of his, desire for a better Africa. He is a Pan-Africanist, and he is the man that liberated. He was the major part of the story of the liberation of, DRC Congo from the hands of Belgium. Now, Patrice Lumumba fought tirelessly. He was born on July, I think, 2nd of July, 1925, in Katanga. DRC Congo was formerly known as Katanga, now DRC Congo. And then he fought tirelessly, and in 1960, they were able to gain their freedom from colonial oppression and colonial rule. And then he was trying to revive DRC Congo and revive the whole of Africa. He was a Pan-Africanist speaking for Africa, speaking against colonial rule in Africa in general. And then he was assassinated in 1961. And that statue was built in respect and in memory of Patrice Lumumba, where he was raising his hand like this. And so this gesture of this man was in respect of Patrice Lumumba and the Pan-Africanist. And everybody respected him for what he was doing because of the love and respect they have for Patrice Lumumba. This is why you, as a person, you must have little knowledge about everything around you. You must have little knowledge about everything around you. You must have little knowledge about everything around you. Now, what caused this chaos and, animosity against Algeria? In the knockout stages of the AFCON, African Cup of Nations, current African Cup of Nations 2025, Amora, who happens to be one of the Algerian players, after he scored the goal against DRC Congo, he did a celebration that was in direct mockery of Patrice Lumumba and that particular fan. That fan's name is Michel. I think Michel Nkuka Mobolanga, something like that. But Michel Nkuka. He did a celebration, in mockery of that man and in extension in mockery of Patrice Lumumba. This was the celebration. So he did that sign and then he laid down. And people were visibly against him and that, animosity transformed and, was now pushed to the general Algerian team. And their next match, which was in the quarterfinal, was against Nigeria. So people were praying for Nigeria to defeat Algeria. Now, how did, Akor Adams come into the picture? They have seen how annoyed Africans around the globe were, and those particularly in footballing world who saw this thing and were angered by the action of Amoura, the Algerian player. They were praying for Nigeria to defeat Algeria. And when, Victor Osimhen got the first goal, after you get the first goal, your opponent can equalize and then the game goes into, extra time and penalty. But then Akor Adams scored the second goal to cement the victory. And when that victory was cemented, his celebration was what you are seeing on your screen. He raised his hand and celebrated in respect of the people of DRC Congo and Patrice Lumumba and in extension Africans at large. He showed that the Africans truly respected the actions, activities, and what Patrice Lumumba stood for. This was why people, praised Nigeria, praised the action of Patrice Lumumba, and praised the action of Akor Adams, and even went further, to mock Algeria and shame them that they have now left, the African Cup of Nations, because it was a moment of, it was so emotional. Even that man that was acting as Patrice Lumumba, Michel Nkuka, he cried on that day in the field of play, in the stadium. He cried. People were very much emotional, and they were totally against Algeria. Totally against Algeria. So you now see the connection between series of events that took place in the AFCON and why people were against. Even it had to, extend to the referee. Though in the case of the referee, so many persons say that, Algerian players were making, some racial um, comments against the referee. But then, if you look at all that has transpired, you could see that the referee may even be annoyed with Algeria for portraying such, a display against Africans, because they saw that display as a display against Africa. A man who fought for the liberation of total Africa, a man who fought for the liberation of DRC Congo, a man who stood for Africans to be liberated. You come out in that manner to mock him. The only African country that was not colonized, I think, was Ethiopia. It was Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the only African country who were not colonized. And that was because they fought and were able to defeat the people, the European power who came to, take over or colonize them at that time. And so Ethiopia was the only African country that was not, colonized. Some people will talk about Liberia, but then, US was, in charge of activities in Liberia. So this was the backstory of what transpired and why this man was, Michel Nkuka was crying, and why Akor Adams did that celebration, and why people were thanking him for the celebration he did. Do you know about this back end story? Let us know your thoughts on everything that transpired in the AFCON. Come on.